Welcome back to part 8 of Finding the Kingdom of Heaven. Last time we left off with the fact that just shy of 300 years or so of severe Christian persecution, it finally came to an end. And that's thanks to someone by the name of Constantine. In 306 AD, Constantine the Great, he came into power. And it was during his reign when Christianity began to transition from an illegal religion to the dominant religion of the Roman Empire. Along with his co-emperor Licinius, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, which effectively decriminalized Christian worship. And this edict, it paved the way for Christians to acquire property and to live in peace. Historical records suggest that even Constantine himself was baptized on his deathbed, and that would be in around 337 AD. And what's interesting is that prior to his death, he had actively encouraged individuals to convert to Christianity. He would often offer rewards to those who underwent baptism. For example, he helped popularize the use of white robes, a practice that was already part of a wider Christian tradition. But what Constantine did, he elevated it to a grander status, transforming it into a prestigious symbol that granted Christians a place in society. Being known as a Christian now, that was an advantage. And at the same time, while all of this was going on, the apostasy from within the hierarchy of the church, as we talked about last time, it was almost full-blown. And to make matters even worse, by this time, there were factions among Christians. Controversies had arisen. Things like they were arguing over the deity of Christ. The majority of bishops, they maintained that Christ was the same substance as the Father. In other words, he's truly God. While others, they professed that, no, he was a created being. He was brought into existence by the Father. And so they say he's not co-eternal with God. And so obviously this was a major controversy, and it was growing in the early part of the 4th century. And so in 325 AD, Constantine convened a special meeting known as the Council of Nicaea. Now, the purpose of the meeting was to resolve these ongoing divisions, and it convened for an extended period of time, about 2 months. It was spanning from late May to late July. Now, there were other issues that were contributing to the discord, but the primary objective was to reconcile their differing viewpoints on the nature of Jesus Christ. Constantine, he sought to resolve these internal conflicts, and so he entrusted the formation of this special council to get it done. And guess who made up this council? Yep, you got it. The city bishops. And it was the city bishops who served as the official delegates, and they had the exclusive authority to cast votes, whatever decisions that they were going to make. However, they didn't travel alone. Each bishop was authorized to bring with him a group of advisors and assistants, and they would come from their respective home cities. These advisors typically consisted of 2 elders and 3 deacons, and despite their absence from the formal voting process, their influence was significant. And let's not forget, Constantine himself was right there the whole time. He's the one who called the meeting and even paid for the bishop's travel and the housing that they needed. And he kicked things off with a powerful speech, and he stayed visible throughout the whole meeting. Even though he didn't actually vote on religious matters, he insisted that they reach a peaceful agreement, and that carried a lot of weight. His presence was a constant reminder of how incredibly important this council was to the Roman Empire. And like I said before, the central issue of the debate was to establish consensus on who Jesus was, specifically whether Jesus was the Son of God and co-equal with God in his eternal nature or not. The problem was that by this time, false teachings by Gnostics had crept into the movement, and it was gaining traction. Therefore, the debate was of utmost importance. And after extensive deliberation and discussion, the parties reached a tentative agreement, and they formulated a document known as the Nicene Creed. And in this document, the bishops agreed that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. However, it is crucial to recognize that their conclusion and their statement did not determine Jesus' divinity. You see, critics of Christianity today, well, they claim it was this council of men in 325, that they're the ones who established the core principles of the faith. They contend that the narratives about Christ, well, they were just simply fabricated and embellished over time. However, their assertion is inaccurate. Christianity, with its core principles, was already established with Jesus Christ as King and Savior. His resurrection from the dead nearly 300 years before the council even met provided evidence of his divinity. The point I'm trying to make here is that the significance of this document lies in its position as the first human creed ever created pertaining to Christianity. And then, approximately 56 years later, the Second Ecumenical Council was held, but this one was held in Constantinople in 381 AD. Now, the choice of Constantinople was significant, as Constantine had relocated the capital of the Roman Empire to this city in 330 AD. Previously known as Byzantium, Constantinople was officially inaugurated on May 11th of that year. During the Second Ecumenical Council, the original Nicene Creed underwent further refinement and was condensed into the well-known Apostles' Creed. What's concerning lies in the fact that these events transpired approximately 300 years after the deaths of the apostles. Neither of these documents, which were composed in the 4th century, were ever sanctioned by the apostles themselves. They were written by uninspired men. And I use the term concerning because many unsuspecting individuals in our present day, well, they erroneously believe that the Apostles' Creed was divinely inspired. In fact, some even give it equal authority to the book of Acts and the rest of the New Testament. Numerous denominations, they assert that the entirety of Christianity is predicated upon this creed, rather than the scriptures exclusively authored by the apostles. What we are witnessing here is the emergence of novel traditions that did not exist prior to the 4th century. But now, these traditions are deemed and accepted as authoritative today. Consequently, by the mid-4th century, the following developments occurred. For the first time, Christianity gained widespread popularity. And as with most popular causes, individuals were so eager to jump on the bandwagon, not necessarily because they held a deep love for the Lord, but rather due to the privileges that were associated with becoming a follower of Jesus Christ. And so, as a result, individuals adopted the label of Christians, but for the wrong reasons. And in the process, they carried with them their previous practice and rituals that deviated from the original pattern that was established by the apostles. For example, it's well known that during the time of the apostles, paganism was so prevalent that the Greek philosopher Chrysostom, living in the late 1st century, he said, "Finding a god in Corinth was easier than locating a man." Corinth was a city overflowing with temples and altars and cults, all dedicated to a myriad of deities. The populace worshipped a multitude of their pagan gods, including a war god, a sun god, a harvest and grain god, and so on and so forth. Just as with Corinth, Ephesus was utterly saturated with pagan worship. In fact, it might be argued that Ephesus' paganism was even more deeply entrenched and economically significant due to the presence of the Temple of Artemis, which was often identified with the Roman goddess Diana. I mean, this magnificent temple, it housed a colossal statue of Diana standing about 90 feet tall. And so we can understand why their polytheistic nature led to such a negative reaction when Paul preached the resurrection of Jesus Christ in Ephesus. I mean, this caused the entire city to erupt in a frenzy in honor of their idol, Diana. And for 2 hours, the citizens of Ephesus erupted in a chorus of, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians! Great is Diana!" Now, the riot, well, it arose from the silversmiths. Their livelihood revolved around manufacturing and selling various replicas and variations of this iconic statue of Diana. The prevailing superstition held that, well, Diana was bestowed with protection and sustenance upon the nations. Therefore, every household, well, they had to possess a statue of Diana as a token of reverence. This was the situation in the first century. Now, fast forwarding just about 300 years to the reign of Emperor Constantine, who, by the way, he was born, he was raised, and in fact, he lived his entire life as a pagan. And he loved construction. He loved building pagan temples. And as recorded in Britannica, he embarked on the construction of the original St. Peter's Basilica, and that was around 330 AD, which, by the way, spanned about 30 years to complete. And so consequently, the following events unfolded in a manner that was entirely natural. Just as you'd expect. Constantine's endeavors, well, it led to the fusion of paganism and Christianity, akin to a marriage, but not one made in heaven. This marriage was not divine, but rather it was human initiated. And as such, one can anticipate the emergence of a religion characterized by the veneration of numerous statues, reflecting the prevalent practice of pagan religions and their worship of deities. And not surprisingly, this new phenomenon incorporated statues of a central female figure, similar to the one depicted in the myth of Diana of Ephesus. And over time, these elements, they gradually evolved, incorporating some aspects of Jesus and the apostles, but it gradually changed into an organizational structure reminiscent of the Roman Empire, the Roman government itself. It's characterized by ritualism and pomp and grandeur, which was all very consistent with the organizational structure of pagan religions that were prevalent in the Roman Empire. And the historical records corroborate this outcome, establishing a government-like hierarchy designed by humans. Ritualism permeated every aspect, accompanied by statues and objects of worship. Additionally, a distinct and separate set of religious garments was exclusively worn by the hierarchy, replicating the attire of Roman officials of that era. And so, doesn't this beg the question, since none of these things existed when the apostles were alive, how did this all emerge? Well, the answer lies in the wisdom of man, who possesses a propensity for invention and so-called improvement upon things already established. But man also harbors a desire for centralized control, evident in both political and religious contexts. The combination of these two elements, so-called improvement and centralized control, is precisely what we observe in the evolution of Christianity. And this is where we're going to stop for now. And we're going to pick up next time right here in part 9. Again, I want to thank you for joining me on this historic journey, and I look forward to you joining me next time. Have a great rest of your day.